Senior Analyst Vextol's fourth appendage trembled as he reviewed the scanning data for the third time. The holographic display before him showed what should have been another routine expansion report for the mighty Zaxthar Empire. Instead, he found himself staring at something that defied every protocol in his 3 centuries of service. Computer, Replay Entertainment Archive Sample 27B. He commanded, his primary eyes fixed on the main screen while his secondary pair monitored the cultural analysis feeds. The projection shifted to show what the humans called a movie, Independence Day, circa 1996. Vextol watched the scenes unfold with growing unease. The similarities between the fictional alien invasion and standard Zaxthar conquest procedures were disturbing. Even more unsettling was the fact that this entertainment predated any contact between humanity and spacefaring civilizations. Analyst Vextol. A stern voice interrupted his observations. The Cultural Integration Committee requires your preliminary report. High Commander Zixera towered in the doorway, her ceremonial armor glinting under the soft bioluminescent lighting. Like most of the Empire's leadership, she had never personally participated in a conquest. The Zaxthar hadn't faced real resistance in over 50 cycles. High Commander, Vextol began carefully, I recommend we classify the Sol system as Category 7 restricted. The silence that followed was deafening. Category 7 was reserved for civilizations too dangerous to approach. The last time it had been invoked was during the encounter with the now extinct hive minds of Proxima Centauri. Explain yourself, Analyst. Their technological level barely registers as Category 1. They haven't even established a permanent presence beyond their orbital space. Vextol activated his presentation matrix. High Commander, please observe these cultural artifacts. Humans have created thousands of detailed scenarios about alien contact. Many of them specifically describe resistance against technologically superior invaders. They've been preparing for us without even knowing we exist. At NASA's Xenobiology Research Center, Dr. Emma Thompson was having an equally unsettling evening. Her quantum resonance scanner, a pet project the department had humored but never taken seriously, was showing impossible readings. Jerry, are you seeing this? She called to her assistant, her eyes never leaving the monitor. The background radiation patterns, they're not random. Jerry Wheeler, a former Air Force cryptographer turned xenobiologist, leaned over her shoulder. His usual smirk faded as he processed the data. Those look like engine signatures, Emma finished, and they're trying to mask them. Poorly, I might add. Almost like they've never had to hide from anyone who might actually be looking. Within hours, Emma's discovery triggered a cascade of quiet alerts across global surveillance networks. The Chinese Space Agency confirmed similar readings. The European Space Union reported unusual gravitational distortions near Jupiter. Even amateur astronomers began posting about strange light patterns that defied normal stellar behavior. In orbit, Colonel Jack Reynolds was completing his final inspection of the International Space Station's new quantum communication array when he received the encrypted message. As he read Emma's preliminary report, his decades of military training kicked in. Houston, he radioed, his voice carefully neutral. We might want to accelerate the Heimdall Protocol. The Heimdall Protocol was one of those things everyone joked about, but never expected to use. A comprehensive response plan for first contact with potentially hostile aliens. It had started as a theoretical exercise by military strategists and sci-fi enthusiasts, but had evolved into a detailed contingency plan adopted by most major world governments. Back in the Zaxthar command ship, Vextol was losing the argument. These are primitive entertainment constructs, High Commander Zixera dismissed. You suggest we fear them because they tell stories. Not just stories, High Commander. They've created millions of different scenarios for this exact situation. They call it science fiction, but I believe it's more akin to psychological warfare preparation. They've imagined every possible way we might attack them and developed countermeasures, even if only theoretically. The High Commander's decision was swift and final. Your concerns are noted, analyst. Proceed with standard subjugation protocols. After all, what harm can a pre-FTL species possibly do to the mighty Zaxthar Empire? Vextol could only watch as the invasion fleet began its final approach. He had one last thought before submitting his official protest. Humans didn't just imagine the future, they shaped it. And now they would shape the Empire's future in ways no one could predict. The destruction of the International Space Station was meant to be a demonstration of power. Instead, it became the Zaxthar Empire's first lesson in human unpredictability. Confirm that again, High Commander Zix Era demanded, her scales flickering with irritation. What do you mean they're laughing? The communications officer nervously adjusted his translator implant. Multiple human broadcasting networks are showing increased activity, but their response doesn't match any known panic patterns. They're sharing something called memes about our attack. One particularly viral image shows their primitive wheeled vehicles with text saying, "Can't park there, mate." On Earth, Colonel Jack Reynolds stood before the United Nations Security Council, his expression grim but determined. The holographic display behind him showed the debris field that was once humanity's proudest space achievement. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "for decades, we've run simulations for this exact scenario. Every military organization, every space agency, even civilian groups have protocols in place. It's time to activate Operation Falling Sky." In the back of the chamber, a young woman raised her hand. "Sir, what about the Gaming Community Initiative?" Reynolds smiled for the first time that day. "Ms. Martinez, your brother Kevin's already on it. Apparently, the alien encryption isn't so different from the DRM on premium game content." Across the globe, an unprecedented mobilization began. Factory workers in Detroit repurposed automobile assembly lines for military equipment. Silicon Valley tech companies redirected their server farms for battlefield calculations. Even Hollywood studios offered their special effects computers for combat simulations. Aboard the Zaxthar flagship, Vextol watched in growing horror as his worst fears materialized. "High Commander, they're not following any known crisis response patterns. Their military bases appear unchanged, but their civilian infrastructure is transforming in ways our tactical computers can't predict." "Impossible," Zix Era dismissed. "They're merely flailing in panic. Proceed with the standard intimidation broadcast." The Empire's message was appropriately dramatic. A massive holographic projection of Zix Era appeared in Earth's skies, demanding immediate surrender. The response came 3 minutes later, faster than any species in recorded history. It wasn't from any government or military leader. Instead, a teenage boy appeared on every Zaxthar screen, his gaming headset still on. "Hey there, Kevin Martinez, professional gamer. Nice try with the encryption, but we cracked it using an exploit from Alien Invasion Simulator 3000. By the way, your ship's defense patterns look a lot like the final boss level." Before the Empire could respond, something even more disturbing happened. Humans began broadcasting their own signals back. Thousands of clips from entertainment archives showing aliens being defeated in countless creative ways. Each transmission came with helpful tactical annotations. "They're not just resisting," Vextol reported, his voice shaking. "They're treating this like something they've rehearsed. Multiple times. In multiple ways." In NASA's newly militarized control center, Dr. Emma Thompson worked frantically with her team. "Their technology isn't that far ahead of our theoretical models," she explained to the Joint Chiefs. "In fact, some of their systems are embarrassingly predictable, almost like they've never had to innovate in actual combat." Colonel Reynolds, now coordinating global defense from a bunker in Colorado, received the latest intelligence with a grim smile. "So they've never seen Independence Day." "Sir," his aide interjected, "you need to see this." Civilian response is unexpected. Around the world, humans weren't panicking. They were adapting with almost enthusiastic efficiency. Gaming communities transitioned seamlessly into tactical analysis teams. Sci-fi convention organizers became logistics coordinators. Even conspiracy theorists proved surprisingly useful, their wild theories occasionally matching alien technology with disturbing accuracy. The Zaxxtar's simple subjugation had turned into a logistical nightmare. Their carefully planned shock and awe tactics met with responses ranging from tactical brilliance to bizarre creativity. One Australian group was successfully jamming Imperial communications using modified didgeridoos, a concept so absurd it bypassed all known defense protocols. As the first day of invasion ended, High Commander Zixera received a troubling update. Their intimidation broadcast had been remixed into something called a TikTok dance challenge, and Imperial warship designs were being critiqued on architecture review blogs. Perhaps, she admitted to Vextal, we should have reviewed more of their science fiction archives before proceeding. Vextal's response was interrupted by an alert. Somehow, humans had already reverse-engineered the Empire's basic shield technology, using parts from something called Radio Shack. The simple subjugation was about to become anything but simple. Kevin Martinez hadn't slept in 48 hours, but his hands remained steady on his custom keyboard. Around him, what used to be his gaming room had transformed into a makeshift command center, filled with the world's top hackers and gaming champions. Their ship's navigation system, he muttered, taking a sip of his fifth energy drink. It's basically running on Space Windows 95. His screen displayed the alien fleet's command protocols, which looked suspiciously like a badly designed video game interface. Kevin, his sister Maria called from her station. You need to see this. Remember that weird bug in Starfleet Commander where you could trick the AI into flying in circles? The Imperial fleet's formation began to waver as human gamers worldwide deployed tactics from decades of space combat simulators. Ships worth billions in alien currency were being outmaneuvered by strategies developed in basement LAN parties. Meanwhile, at the Pentagon's newly established Xenotechnology Division, Dr. Emma Thompson was having an equally surprising revelation. Their technology isn't advanced, she explained to Colonel Reynolds, pointing at the holographic display. It's just stagnant. They haven't had to innovate in centuries. Look at this engine design. It's efficient but hideously predictable. Any first-year engineering student could spot the vulnerabilities. Reynolds nodded, his military experience recognizing the signs. They're like an empire that's never faced real resistance. They've forgotten how to adapt. In orbit, the Zaxxtar fleet was experiencing its first taste of human warfare doctrine. Their ships, arranged in perfect geometric formations, faced a chaotic swarm of hastily retrofitted Earth vehicles. SpaceX rockets performed maneuvers that violated every known rule of space combat. Even civilian satellites had been reprogrammed into a makeshift defense grid. This is impossible, High Commander Zixera raged as another formation broke under human assault. Their tactics make no sense. They're using their own debris as weapons. Vextal, watching from his analysis station, finally understood what made humans different. High Commander, they're not following any tactics. Each group is improvising independently. There's no single pattern to counter because they're not using a unified strategy. The situation on Earth was equally chaotic and effective. Social media platforms had transformed overnight into military coordination networks. TikTok users were spotting alien movements through viral dance videos. Twitter threads documented weaknesses in alien technology with brutal efficiency. In Silicon Valley, tech companies repurposed their algorithms for war. Dating apps became secure communication networks. Food delivery services coordinated supply lines. Gaming servers were transformed into battle simulators. Dr. Thompson's team made another breakthrough while studying captured alien technology. Their universal translator, she announced during an emergency briefing, it can't handle human memes. They literally can't process how we communicate. The revelation sparked a new phase of resistance. Humans began weaponizing their culture itself. The aliens found their communications flooded with deliberately confusing references, inside jokes, and cultural allusions that their translation systems couldn't comprehend. "What is a rickroll?" demanded a frustrated Zaxthar commander. "And why is it appearing in our tactical displays?" In his parents' basement, now designated as Strategic Command Center Beta, Kevin Martinez led his team in another breakthrough. Their entire fleet network, he explained to the Joint Chiefs via Zoom, uses standardized passwords. They've never needed cybersecurity because no one's ever hacked them before. Colonel Reynolds, watching the chaos unfold from the war room, couldn't help but smile. "We're not just fighting back," he realized. "We're teaching them why they should have taken Vextel's warnings seriously." The Zaxthar Empire had expected a simple conquest. Instead, they faced a species that turned everything, from social media to space junk, into weapons. A species that had spent generations imagining and preparing for this exact scenario through entertainment, games, and stories. As the third day of invasion drew to a close, Vextel submitted a new report to the Imperial Command. Its title was simple: Humanity's Greatest Weapon, Creativity in Chaos. High Commander Zixara, watching another perfect formation fall to seemingly random human tactics, finally began to understand. The Empire had spent millennia perfecting their conquest protocols. Humans had spent millennia imagining ways to break them. And imagination, it turned out, was the most powerful weapon of all. Lieutenant Madison, Mad Cooper, had spent 15 years mastering high-speed precision driving before joining the Space Force. Now, as she strapped herself into the prototype X-37C spacefighter, those skills were about to save humanity. "Houston, this is Drift Leader," she radioed, her voice steady despite the experimental craft's vibrations. "Ready to show these aliens why you don't challenge a NASCAR champion to a race." The Zaxthar fleet hung in high orbit, their ships arranged in what their tactical manuals called the impenetrable sphere formation. They never expected what happened next. "Deploy the nets," Madison commanded. Across Earth's orbit, thousands of decommissioned satellites and carefully preserved space debris activated their newly installed thrusters. Years of warnings about space junk had become humanity's secret weapon. High Commander Zixara watched in disbelief as her perfect formation was disrupted by a cloud of precisely controlled debris. "This is barbaric. They're using their own technological waste as a weapon." "Houston, initiating Drift Maneuver Alpha," Madison announced. Her fighter shot through the debris field, using patterns she perfected on rain-slick tracks across America. Behind her, a squadron of pilots, each chosen from the world's top racing circuits, followed her lead. In the Pentagon's control room, Colonel Reynolds watched the tactical display with pride. They expected traditional space combat, he explained to the Joint Chiefs. Instead, they're getting the space equivalent of street racing. The Zaxthar ships, designed for elegant space warfare, couldn't adapt to the chaos. Their targeting systems, calibrated for military vessels, struggled to track fighters that moved like street racers. Every evasive pattern in their database proved useless against pilots who treated space combat like a high-stakes derby. "Impossible," a Zaxthar weapons officer reported. "They're using gravitational slingshots around their own debris field. The trajectories, they're not following any known combat doctrine." In his analysis chamber, Vextel finally understood. "They're not using combat doctrines," he explained to the increasingly frustrated High Commander. "They're using racing techniques. Every pilot is flying like they're in one of their action movies." Madison's voice crackled over the comm as her fighter spun through an impossibly tight turn around a defunct weather satellite. "Just like Talladega 23, she grinned. "Except this time, the wall is an alien battlecruiser." The battle shifted as humanity's improvised tactics took their toll. Gaming squadrons, led by Kevin Martinez's team, had hacked the debris field's tracking systems, turning Earth's orbit into a real-time video game. Each piece of space junk became a power-up or obstacle in the world's most important racing game. "Their shields are standardized," Dr. Thompson reported from her lab. "They never expected anyone to attack from multiple angles simultaneously. It's like they've only ever fought enemies that follow the same rules they do. The Zaxthar fleet's formation continued to deteriorate. Their ships, unable to predict the erratic movements of Earth's defenders, began colliding with each other. Centuries of rigid tactical doctrine proved worthless against humans who treated warfare like an extreme sport. Status report. High Commander Zixera demanded as another destroyer fell victim to Madison's unconventional tactics. They're drifting, High Commander, came the bewildered response. Their vessels are intentionally sliding sideways through space. Our targeting computers can't compensate. Madison's voice rang out across the battlefield. Time for the final, racers. Execute Operation Tokyo Drift. The space around Earth erupted in chaos as humanity's defenders executed their most audacious move yet. Using the debris field as a cosmic racetrack, Earth's fighters performed maneuvers that violated every principle of traditional space combat. In the aftermath, as the Zaxthar fleet retreated to regroup, High Commander Zixera received the damage reports with growing horror. A third of her fleet had been disabled, not by superior technology, but by humans treating space warfare like their entertainment. Perhaps, she admitted to Vextal, we should have paid more attention to something called Fast and Furious in their cultural database. As Madison's squadron returned to Earth, she had one final transmission. Hey aliens, next time, bring a better ride to the race. The first battle was over. The street racing phase of human space warfare had begun. They turned a children's toy into a quantum decryption device, Vextal reported, his secondary eyes twitching with stress. Something called a Rubik's Cube combined with their primitive quantum computers. Dr. Rebecca Anderson stood in her lab at MIT, surrounded by a bizarre combination of alien tech and vintage puzzle cubes. Her 7-year-old daughter's collection had inadvertently provided the key to cracking Zaxthar encryption. The aliens think linearly, she explained to the assembled military brass. But these cubes taught us to think in three-dimensional algorithms. Their encryption is actually simpler than solving a speed cube blindfolded. The Zaxthar Empire's central command was facing an unprecedented crisis. Humans weren't just resisting. They were adapting and innovating at a terrifying pace. Every defeat seemed to make them stronger, more creative, more unpredictable. High Commander Zixera reviewed the latest intelligence with mounting dread. They've begun modifying their primitive projectile weapons with our shield technology. How did they even understand it so quickly? Ma'am, a junior analyst interrupted. You need to see this. They're sharing our technical specifications on something called Reddit. The humans are crowdsourcing our defeat. On Earth, the transformation was accelerating. Civilian technologies were being repurposed in ways that defied conventional military logic. Teenagers with 3D printers were manufacturing components for hybrid weapons. Social media influencers had become tactical coordinators, their massive follower networks transformed into instant response teams. Look at this, Dr. Anderson pointed to a holographic display. They thought their technology was too advanced for us to comprehend. Instead, it's like they never questioned their own fundamental assumptions. They'd been using the same basic designs for centuries. Colonel Reynolds, watching a demonstration of the latest hybrid weapons, shook his head in amazement. They gave us their technical specifications, thinking we couldn't possibly understand them. Instead, Kevin Martinez interrupted from his gaming command center. They just gave us the cheat codes to their entire empire. The Zaxthar's growing concern turned to panic as humans began deploying weapons that shouldn't have been possible with their technology level. Earth's defenders had taken alien tech and modified it in ways that violated the Empire's understanding of physics. They're using our own gravity manipulators to enhance something called breakdancing, a Zaxthar tactical officer reported, his voice trembling. The resulting motion patterns are impossible for our targeting systems to track. Vextal's analysis became increasingly desperate. High Commander, they're not just learning our technology. They're improving it. They ask questions we never thought to ask. They find applications we never imagined. In her lab, Dr. Anderson made another breakthrough. Their AI systems, she explained to her team. They're too perfect, too logical. They've never had to account for human unpredictability. Watch this. She demonstrated how a simple game of rock, paper, scissors could crash alien targeting computers. The Zaxxtar eyes, programmed for perfect logic, couldn't handle the deliberate randomness of human game theory. The Empire's military doctrine, unchanged for millennia, was being undone by human creativity. Their standardized tactics were being countered by strategies drawn from video games, sports, and street dance. Their perfect formations were being disrupted by techniques borrowed from flash mobs and parkour. They're not just fighting us, Vextol realized, watching another supposedly impregnable defense system fall to a combination of human innovations. They're treating our entire invasion like a puzzle to be solved, a game to be won, a challenge to be met. High Commander Zixera received the latest casualty reports with growing horror. The humans had turned their own psychological warfare against them. Every Zaxxtar victory was met with an exponential increase in human innovation. Every setback seemed to fuel their creativity. Perhaps, she admitted, watching Earth's defenders deploy another impossible combination of technologies, we should have heeded the warning signs. A species that turns everything, even their toys, into weapons is not one to be underestimated. In her lab, Dr. Anderson's daughter casually solved another Rubik's Cube, unknowingly providing the pattern for cracking another layer of alien encryption. The Empire's technological superiority was becoming its greatest weakness. They had given humanity access to advanced technology, never considering that humans would immediately ask, "Yes, but what else can it do?" Captain Michael Mad Dog Rodriguez had never imagined his parkour skills would be useful in space combat. Yet here he was, leading Earth's first zero-gravity combat team, composed entirely of extreme sports athletes. "Remember, guys," he radioed to his team as they approached the Zaxxtar flagship, "it's just like that Red Bull competition in Rio, except the building is trying to kill you." The Empire had deployed their main fleet, expecting to overwhelm Earth's defenses with sheer numbers. They hadn't counted on humans treating space warfare like an X Games event. Target acquired. Sarah Shredder Williams, former skateboarding champion, reported. Beginning approach run. Just like grinding a rail, right, Cap? The Zaxxtar watched in confusion as human combat teams used their ship's hull like an urban playground. Their security systems, designed to repel traditional military attacks, had no protocols for dealing with humans treating their warships like skate parks. "They're doing what?" High Commander Zixera demanded, watching the security feeds in disbelief. "They're bouncing off our hull plating," the security chief reported, "using our own gravity fields for momentum. It's like they're treating our battleship as some kind of recreational facility." In the Pentagon's war room, Colonel Reynolds watched the operation with a mix of pride and amazement. "We tried traditional military tactics," he explained to the Joint Chiefs. "But it turns out extreme sports athletes have a unique understanding of three-dimensional movement that our best soldiers can't match." The Zaxxtar fleet's formation was perfect, their tactics unchanged for centuries. But their rigid doctrine had no answer for humans who treated space combat like a freestyle motocross exhibition. "Check this out," Rodriguez called as he executed a perfect zero backflip between two alien gun emplacements, using their own artificial gravity against them. Just like that championship run in Barcelona. Dr. Anderson's voice crackled over the comm. "Their shield harmonics can't adapt to irregular movement patterns. They've never had to defend against anyone who moves, well, like you guys do." The Empire's commanders watched in horror as their supposedly impregnable defenses were breached by humans using techniques from skateboarding, parkour, and freestyle BMX. Each attempt to counter these unconventional tactics only gave the humans new obstacles to play with. "They're not soldiers," Vextol realized, studying the footage. "They're performers, athletes. They're treating our most advanced defensive systems like playground equipment." On Broadway, the theatrical community had joined the war effort in their own unique way. A hastily produced show called How to Dance Like a Zaxthar was providing surprisingly accurate insights into alien movement patterns and combat formations. Their entire military doctrine is like a choreographed dance, the show's director explained during a military briefing. Once you understand the rhythm, you can predict every move. Back in space, Rodriguez's team was proving this theory. They moved through the Zaxthar defenses like they were performing a carefully planned routine, each impossible maneuver flowing into the next. "Hey aliens," Sarah broadcast as she disabled another weapon system, with a move straight from her X Games portfolio. "Thanks for making your ship so grindable." The Empire's response was predictable. They deployed more ships, more weapons, more of the same tactics that had served them for centuries. But against humans who treated combat like an extreme sport, quantity simply meant more playground equipment. Status report. High Commander Zixera demanded as another defense system fell to what the humans called a 6-720 with a twist. They're showing off, came the bewildered response. Each team is trying to outperform the others. They're turning our defeat into some kind of competition. In his analysis chamber, Vextall added another note to his growing report. Humans don't just fight, they perform. They turn combat into art, into sport, into entertainment. How do you defeat an enemy that treats your most powerful weapons as props in their performance? As Rodriguez's team completed their mission, leaving a trail of disabled Zaxthar systems in their wake, he had one final transmission. "Hey, alien dudes. Thanks for the awesome park. Same time tomorrow." The Empire's desperate measures had failed. They had brought their main fleet to crush humanity's resistance, only to watch it become the galaxy's most elaborate skate park. Commander Ashley "Ash" Blackwood had spent years studying historical warfare before joining the Space Force. Now, standing in the war room beneath Cheyenne Mountain, she was about to make history by using tactics from the past to save humanity's future. "The Zaxthar have never heard of Hannibal crossing the Alps," she explained to Colonel Reynolds, gesturing at the holographic display of the alien fleet, or the Mongols' feigned retreat. They'd forgotten what it's like to face an enemy who learns from history. The Empire's reputation was crumbling. Across their territory, subject species were watching in amazement as humanity turned the invincible Zaxthar fleet into a cautionary tale. "They're using something called Tinder to coordinate attacks," a Zaxthar intelligence officer reported, his confusion evident. "Our surveillance can't distinguish their military communications from what they call dating profiles." High Commander Zixera's primary command ship shuddered as another human counterattack struck home. "How are they anticipating our every move?" "Ma'am," Vextall responded, reviewing the latest data. "They're not anticipating. They're remembering. Every tactic we use, they've seen something similar in their historical records. They have thousands of years of warfare to draw from." On Earth, Dr. Thompson's team had made another breakthrough. Their tactical computers, she explained to Commander Blackwood, they can only process strategies they've encountered before. They literally can't compute tactics from our ancient battles. Ash smiled, her mind already racing through centuries of military history. "So what happens if we throw Sun Tzu at them?" The answer came swiftly as Earth launched its most ambitious counteroffensive yet. Each human battle group employed tactics from different historical periods, creating chaos in the Zaxthar response systems. "Squadron Alpha is using Napoleonic naval tactics," Kevin reported from his command center, now upgraded with historical battle simulators. "Squadron Beta is going full Genghis Khan. And Squadron Charlie, they're recreating the Battle of Thermopylae." In space, the Empire's perfectly ordered military doctrine collapsed in the face of humanity's historical knowledge. Their ships, arranged in formations unchanged for centuries, had no defense against strategies that predated space travel itself. "They're using something called a Trojan horse," a panicked Zaxthar officer reported. "We detected the trap, but our tactical databases have no reference for why it's called that or what it means." In orbit, Madison Cooper led her racing squadron in maneuvers inspired by ancient cavalry charges. Rodriguez's extreme sports team adapted Roman testudo formations for zero-gravity combat. Each human group added their own twist to historical tactics, creating a constantly evolving battle strategy that the Zaxthar couldn't predict. Fascinating. Vextal noted as another imperial formation broke under human assault. They're not just copying their history, they're adapting it, learning from it. Every battle they've ever fought, every strategy they've ever conceived, becomes a new weapon. The breaking point came when humanity deployed what they called Operation Odysseus. The Zaxthar fleet, faced with tactics from a 3,000-year-old poem, finally began to retreat. How? High Commander Zixera demanded, watching her perfect military machine collapse. How can they be so effective with such primitive historical references? Because, High Commander, Vextol replied, while we spent centuries perfecting a single way of war, they spent millennia imagining and practicing countless ways to fight. Every human child learns more military history before age 12 than our officers study in their entire careers. Commander Blackwood's voice echoed across the battlefield. Hey aliens, ready for a lesson in Earth history? Today's topic: why you don't invade a species that turned war into an art form. As the Zaxthar fleet retreated in disarray, Vextal added one final note to his report. The humans don't just remember their history, they learn from it, adapt it, and use it to shape their future. A species with such a deep understanding of warfare, yet such a drive to imagine new possibilities, is not one to be underestimated. In the war room, Colonel Reynolds watched the alien fleet flee. Well, Commander Blackwood, it seems your history lessons were quite effective. Ash smiled, already planning the next phase. Just wait until they learn about guerrilla warfare. The Grand Council chamber of the Zaxthar Empire had never been so silent. Vextal stood before the assembled leadership, his final report projected in holographic detail around the vast circular room. Distinguished members of the council, he began, what you are about to read will fundamentally change our understanding of warfare, civilization, and the very nature of intelligence itself. The report's title hung in the air: Species Analysis. Humanity: Why Traditional Conquest Protocols Will Always Fail. High Commander Zixera, her once pristine armor now bearing scars from human warfare, spoke first. Proceed, Senior Analyst Vextal. Help us understand how a pre-FTL species drove back our finest fleet. The holographic display shifted, showing scenes from Earth's resistance. Madison Cooper's racing squadron performing impossible maneuvers. Rodriguez's team treating battleships like playgrounds. Commander Blackwood's historical battle adaptations. Humans, Vextal explained, are not merely a species. They are an anomaly. Every assumption we made about technological progression, about military doctrine, about the very nature of warfare, they broke them all. In the council chamber's public gallery, representatives from a dozen subject species watched with growing interest. The mighty Zaxthar Empire, undefeated for centuries, had been forced to retreat by a species that hadn't even reached the stars. Their strength, Vextal continued, lies not in their technology, but in their imagination. Every human is a potential warrior, not because they are trained for war, but because they are trained to adapt, to create, to imagine. The display showed Dr. Anderson's quantum decryption breakthrough, powered by children's toys. Kevin Martinez's gaming techniques turning military strategy into a video game. Dr. Thompson's team reverse engineering alien technology through sheer creativity. A Zaxthar warrior, Vextal noted, spends decades mastering our perfect combat forms. A human child spends decades imagining new ways to break them. The council stirred uncomfortably as the report detailed humanity's unique characteristics. Their ability to turn entertainment into training, their habit of preparing for scenarios that hadn't happened, their tendency to treat every challenge as a puzzle to be solved. Most crucially, Vextal emphasized, they learn, not just from success, but from failure. Every defeat makes them stronger. Every setback fuels their creativity. They don't just adapt to challenges, they thrive on them. The The final section of the report appeared, titled Recommended Action, Navy or Engage. This is not merely a military recommendation, Vextol explained. This is a species that turned children's toys into weapons, games into battle strategies, and sports into combat techniques. They defeat us not because they are stronger, but because they are endlessly, terrifyingly creative. High Commander Zixera stood, her authority evident despite her recent defeat. The Council has a question, Analyst. What happens if we continue to engage? Vextol's response was immediate. They improve. Even now, they're incorporating our technology into their civilization in ways we never imagined possible. They're not just learning our weaknesses, they're teaching themselves to be stronger. The display showed final footage, humans celebrating their victory not with military parades, but with parties, games, and what they called memes. This, Vextol concluded, is why we must never engage the humans again. They don't think like us. They don't fight like us. They don't create like us. And most importantly, they don't lose like us. Every defeat is just practice for their next victory. As the Council debated, news of the report spread throughout the Empire. Subject species began looking at their own ancient cultures, remembering times when they too had been more creative, more adaptive, more human. The report's final line became the most classified secret in Imperial history. The humans didn't just defeat our invasion. They made it look fun. And that, perhaps, is the most terrifying thing about them. In his private chambers later, Vextol added one personal note to his diary. We came to conquer a primitive species. Instead, we learned a valuable lesson. Never underestimate a civilization that spends as much time imagining the future as it does building it. On Earth, life returned to normal. Except now every video game, every sport, every children's toy carried a new possibility. Training for humanity's next impossible victory.